Assalamu alaikum and good greetings. So in this video we will be watching a video titled How Jesus Claimed to be God in Gospel of Mark, Nabeel Qureshi. Now I have been suggested to watch videos from Nabeel Qureshi for quite some time. I haven't got the time to go around to any of his videos, so this will be the first, I think. I'm interested to see what he is going to say. Without further ado, let's watch.
What does Mark's gospel have to say about Jesus? I'm going to distill it for you. Every time Jesus is asked who he is in a public setting, or every time someone says to Jesus, "This is who you are," in a public setting, Jesus has a response. Don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone. Even when Peter, his disciple in Mark chapter 8, says who Jesus is, Jesus says, "Don't tell anyone." There's only one place in the entire Gospel of Mark that Jesus comes out and boldly proclaims who he is. Are you with me so far? Let me see some nods. Good. And not this kind of nod. Okay. There's only one place in Mark's gospel where Jesus says clearly who he is. Now, up until then, he's been using a title for himself quite regularly. What is that title? Son of Man. Over 80 times in the Gospels, Jesus uses the term Son of Man. The first time it's found is in Mark chapter 2, verse 10. The next time it's found is in Mark chapter 2, verse 24. Throughout Mark's Gospel, Son of Man is the one where Jesus uses the title to refer to himself frequently. Now, there are two sons of men in the Old Testament. One found in Ezekiel and one found in the book of Daniel. Okay, these are two very different sons of men. The Son of Man in the book of Ezekiel is a lowly human figure. God refers to Ezekiel in the vocative every time, calling him the Son of Man. Son of Man do this, Son of Man do that. And it's to emphasize how human Ezekiel is. But then there's a Son of Man in the book of Daniel, which looks very, very different. This is a Son of Man who comes on the clouds of heaven. What does that mean? The only being that comes on the clouds of heaven in the Old Testament is a divine being. In fact, God comes on the clouds of heaven in the Old Testament. So here in the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verse 13, you have one who looks like a son of man.
Is there any reference that I can take a look at that verse to see what exactly is mentioned? Because now I think he's just giving a lecture without going back to the individual verses, right?
Man coming on the clouds of heaven. A very different Son of Man. Which one is Jesus claiming to be? Well, like I said, there's one place in the Gospel of Mark where Jesus boldly, loudly, publicly, clearly proclaims who he is. And that's Mark chapter 14, verse 62. In Mark chapter 14, verse 62, Jesus has been asked by the high priest, who is he? Who is he? Up until this point, he hasn't been saying. This is known as the climax of Mark's gospel. This is what everything has been building to. This question, Jesus, who are you? And Jesus responds, the question is, who are you? Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One? Jesus responds, I am. And you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming with the clouds of heaven. You will see the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. So which Son of Man is Jesus referring to? I can hear you. Daniel. He's referring to the one in Daniel, the Son of Man who comes to the clouds of heaven. That's the one he's been talking about. Let's revisit Daniel and see what the Son of Man is about. Daniel is looking at his vision. He's having a vision, and he sees God, the Father, the Ancient of Days, being worshipped on a throne. So this is God, the Father, being worshipped on a throne, surrounded by angels. And then Daniel says something very interesting. He says, behold, verse 13, chapter 7, behold, I look in my night visions, and one like a Son of Man approached the Ancient of Days. So here's God the Father, the Ancient of Days, being worshipped by angels. One like a Son of Man came on the clouds of heaven. As only God and divine being comes.
Is that meaning that the interpretation of who that Son of Man that comes, and he said that it is divine, etc. Is that mentioned in the verse, or it is interpreted as such, meaning you interpret it as divine because it is on the cloud or something? But in this kind of story, right, before we move on, right, if I understand correctly, he said that the Father is being worshipped by angel, and then something else come, right? Of course, yeah. Because the question, I think you can guess what my question is, whether it's one being or it's actually a separate entity. And of course, some Christian would believe that even though God is one, but it can be interacting with each other. One is in elsewhere.
the Son of Man comes on the clouds of heaven, and to him, that Son of Man, is given glory, authority, and sovereign power. Okay, so whoever this Son of Man is, he looks like a Son of Man according to Daniel. He's given glory, authority, and sovereign power. He's coming as a God.
Given, but
The man is. He looks like a Son of Man according to Daniel. He's given glory, authority, and sovereign power.
given glory, authority, and sovereign power. Meaning given, meaning it's not his own, right? But at the same time, he's divine. Meaning that is there such a belief that there's another divine being that is being given the authority by God? Is that what it meant?
He's coming as a God into heaven. He's given glory, authority, and sovereign power in heaven. Then it says, people of every nation and language served him. Stop.
Okay. Because he's given authority, then every people serve him. Okay, so
Who is the one who receives service in heaven? God.
okay, that point, that conclusion there, because he asks who is being given service in heaven? God. Is that a concept that is originally have been established prior, or interpretation?
Or you might ask, Nabeel, what kind of service is this? Maybe it's some other kind of service. I don't know. Maybe there's tables, restaurant tables in heaven. We're all going to get served, right? What is this service? This service, according to the Bible, over 130 times this word is used in the Septuagint in the Greek New Testament. It's the word latruo. Every single time this word service is used, it's used as a word due only to God. Due only to God. No human ever receives latruo. Actually, one time a human does receive latruo, and God curses that. He says, essentially, that is due to me. You are cursed for having received latruo. And yet here, the one who looks like a...
Is that what's language that? Is that Greek or Aramaic?
Son of Man, who has glory, authority, and sovereign power in heaven, came as God comes, is being served in heaven with a service due only to God by all people of every nation and language. And then it says his kingdom is one that will not pass away, and his dominion will never be destroyed. Wait a minute. Stop. In the Old Testament, you've got God being worshipped in heaven, and then you have one who looks like a Son of Man being worshipped in heaven with a service due only to God in his own kingdom. No one tell me that there's no foreshadow of the Trinity in the Old Testament. It actually starts in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, but it's clearly found here as well. And as if Jesus needed to make his point any clearer.
So from there, right, because the way it is being mentioned, it is, how can it not be understood as two different entities? Because there's one and there's another one. So what kind of Trinity are you talking about? Right, because I think they have to, harmonize between verse that says God is one and such concept as, suddenly there's God and there's something also divine there, and how to harmonize, and hence you have to say that, as in essence they're one or something. I've heard those kind of words being used. The essence is still God, but that is so bizarre to me, because meaning that, are you saying that there are different entities with the same essence then the essence is God? So then what is God to you actually?
He then says, you will see him sitting at the right hand of the power. That Son of Man will be sitting at the right hand of the power.
Okay, so the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of God, basically, right? So it's like, the companion of God, or of course to a Muslim that is shirk. Of course, we will never say anything like that. But that concept, it is interesting to me, that how do you understand all of this and still see, because they will always say, but we still believe God is one.
What is this? This is a reference to Psalm 110 verse 1. In Psalm 110 verse 1, it says, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand, and I will make the enemies a footstool for your feet. No one in all of Second Temple Jewish history ever claimed the right to sit next to God on his throne.
Sit next to God. Right, so even those words, I'm not sure. Sometimes I wonder whether some Christians, even though they verbally say, God is one and is triune God, which is one God but it's triune, 3%, etc., but subconsciously when they imagine it, it's still distinct being, right? Because that's why one can be on the side of the other, etc. if you're a Christian, can you at least appreciate why I'm viewing it as such when, verbally when you explain it, for example, like this, it come across as such, right? It never appear as it is one.
Not only did no one ever claim it for themselves, no one claimed it for anyone else. Because if you were to say that, then essentially what you're saying is that God has an heir. It's like the king sitting on his throne with his son, the prince, next to him. That's what it means to sit next to God in that context. That's why Moses was never shown sitting next to God. That's why Enoch was never shown sitting next to God. Or any of the archangels. They were all shown standing next to God. Sitting next to God would be blasphemy. That would mean that they are God. Yet Jesus claims not...
Yeah, what? What's the difference between standing and sitting?
Not only to be the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven, whose worship with service due only to God, but also has the right to sit next to God on the throne. He's the heir to the throne of God.
So Jesus is the heir of the throne to God. Yes.
But also has the right to sit next to God on the throne. He's the heir to the throne of God.
So Jesus is the heir of the throne of God. Very interesting. So it's like, if you imagine it, it's literally like, a king and the son, right? Meaning that when the king dies, it passes over to the son. Basically, that's the word. That's the kind of word is being used here.
Is it any surprise then why the high priests in this inquisition opened up their robes and said, "You have heard the blasphemy for himself. What shall we do?" And everyone responds, "Crucify him." What was blasphemy at that time? Again, I'm going to defer to Bart Ehrman. Bart Ehrman says that it's not blasphemy to claim to be a Messiah. It's not blasphemy to tell people they're wrong. It's blasphemy to claim prerogatives due only to God. And that's what Jesus claimed. That's why he was found guilty for blasphemy. That's why he was crucified. By the way, this claim from Psalm 110 verse 1, is it historically sound? Now, I've used Mark Gospel, but I don't want to make it sound like the Bible says it, therefore it's true. Historical Jesus scholars take a look at the term Son of Man, and they say that the term Son of Man fulfills the most stringent criteria of historical investigation. And what's that criteria called? It's called the criterion of double dissimilarity. This criterion of the historical method is so selective that once it fulfills that, scholars conclude this must have been said. And I can answer questions exactly on how that works if you like during the Q&A. That's how strong it is, the Son of Man claim by Jesus. And what about the one that says Jesus was sitting at the right hand of the power? How strong is that? This is the Old Testament reference that's used the most in the New Testament. Over 20 times it's found in the New Testament. It permeates all sorts of letters. It permeates the Gospels. It's found by multiple authors in the New Testament. It is so woven into early Christian history, we can't deny that it's at the earliest stratum. So did Jesus claim to be God? Once again, I argue that we can't ever claim certainty in these matters, but if we're going to say, what's the historically most responsible and by far most responsible conclusion, I would say yes. The evidence points to the fact, even in the earliest gospel, interwoven through all the gospels, verified by the strongest criterion of its...
Okay, so what's this?
Again, I argue that we can't ever claim certainty in these matters.
Why is it, meaning that we can only guess, and this is the best guess? Is that what it means? I mean, when people say, did Jesus ever claim divinity or claim to be God, there never be a certainty. What's the word?
So did Jesus claim to be God? Once again, I argue that we can't ever claim certainty in these matters.
We can't claim certainty in this matter. Meaning that for any Christian that says, yeah, for certain, Jesus have claimed to be God, meaning that based on Nabeel Qureshi, no, there's no certainty in that. But based on all these indications, based on how he interpreted, he seems to believe that it is a strong case that Jesus have actually claimed that, because the word itself is just saying son of man, right? And then he link it to another verse of Son of Man, so meaning that, yeah.
But if we're going to say what's the historically most responsible and by far most responsible conclusion, I would say yes. The evidence points to the fact, even in the earliest gospel, interwoven through all the gospels, verified by the strongest criterion of historical investigation, Jesus claimed to be God.
All right, so that's the video. Interesting. Yeah, I have mentioned my questions throughout, trying to understand one, how certain conclusions were made. Second, is the way I perceive what was mentioned, is accurate or how is not accurate. And third, then based on the final conclusion of this video, it is the best guess based on the understanding and interpretation of what was mentioned about him being the Son of Man is based on that understanding. Hence, that implied, the claim of, it implied the claim of, I think, based on what is literal, the claim of, being in heaven, sitting on the right hand of God, etc. Right? But from all of those to go to that is also God, I have my question just now, so feel free to elaborate. But it has to be, meaning it does takes a multiple layer of interpretation, right? Because it's not clear cut, I am, right? So that's interesting. Yeah, so that's it, meaning how Jesus claimed to be God in Gospel of Mark. Yeah, how Jesus claimed to be God. He claimed to be Son of Man, which is understood to be in heaven, divine, on the right hand side of God, which is interpreted as God himself. Okay, tell me in the comment section. Feel free to educate me on this matter. Thank you for watching. See you next time.